So I have not only read the book cover to cover, but also familiarized myself with Billy Bunter, who I had no clue who he was.
It's this new generation that, that's so ill-read. but please continue.
I don't really need to introduce Upamanyu Chatterjee. At least when I was in school, his book, which was made into a film, English August, we all knew, and it was this new thing which no one had thought of. What is the starting point of when you write? How do you approach the process of writing?
Even if it's 2 sentences, I put down something and then you read it the next day and say, what shit is this? So I'm always in a bad mood. My family will confirm. When I can't. I'm useless at this at research. My doctor friend from Bombay is here. Lawyers, everyone's been incredibly helpful. What I do is, okay, this is what I want, and I want it by tomorrow.
Just the reasonable bureaucrat emerges whenever you write.
Just like tomorrow. My brother who's here, who said, I see that you want to impress your readers with the amount of research that you have done. So, which is true. When you ask your legal eagle friends, believe it or not, they get tired of your questions. Really, just can you just shut up? Can you just then just stop? In fact, they stop answering.
Scent of Red Herring is about based on your
Sachit and Gayatri's,
Prem, a name at least for my generation made famous by Salman Khan. He's called Prem in every Suraj Barjatiya film. See, I give you these pop culture things. This generation knows nothing about pop culture. I don't think a Bengali could crack the Lodi scene. Good job.
Lodi is my... you see, because I said, okay, it's happening in January. What the hell happens in... Sikhs just drink themselves to death throughout the year. So what happens in January? Lodi!
The detailing of how to write mercy petitions, etc., it's so thoroughly done. If any of us are ever in prison, I may be at some point soon.
Yeah, I hope it's not because of this session.
No, not this.
Otherwise, it's fine.
Accused of far worse. In that story where this Bengali gentleman from Havara is trying to communicate with a Tamil police officer in Tamil Nadu, and the line is, and then they both conversed in Hindi till it didn't sound like Hindi. And I was like, dude, what a time for that line to arrive when all the Hindi imposition debate is happening.
Mahal is, what about Mahal?
Mahal kya sir? Aapka to beef खा के murder कर रहा है character. हाँ? हिंदी के बारे में लड़ रहे हैं. मैं ही जाऊँगा sir. आपको कुछ नहीं होगा. You're
If it happens to you, I don't care. But, I'm not.
Thank you for inviting me for this conversation. I am flattered, privileged, and altogether inadequate for this chat, especially when I said I'm interviewing a celebrated author, a former bureaucrat, and a Bengali. So I should be prepared to be scolded if I get anything wrong. So I have not only read the book cover to cover, but also familiarized myself with Billy Bunter, who I had no clue who he was.
It's this new generation that, that's so ill-read. But please continue.
So I'll keep providing any pop culture references because Punjabi music is something I'm very familiar with. But I don't really need to introduce Upamanyu Chatterjee. At least when I was in school, his book, which was made into a film, English August, we all knew, and it was this new thing which no one had thought of. He has written all these books and also won an award that I can't pronounce, Officer des Arts et des Letters by the French government. I've got that completely wrong, but...
You have, but...
So, first of all, we'll go story by story, and apparently we have a few people in the audience who are the inspiration behind at least, or even the information behind at least 2, if not more.
Yes. The first story, which is set on the high seas, would not have been possible without my brother Bita Shok's help. In fact, it's based on 2 paragraphs in one of his stories in a collection called The Piano Man, which is in his first collection of short stories. And the third story, The Stink of Red Herring, is has a protagonist whose personality is loosely based on the father of Sachit, who is here in the front row, and Sachit and Prem Kumar's daughter-in-law, Prem Kumar, who is the founder of the Globe Detective Agency, came back from the US in the late 50s, early 60s, and instead of becoming a civil engineer, told his outraged parents that, oh, no, I don't want to become a civil engineer. I want to be a detective. I want to be India's first detective. When I heard that story years and years and years ago, I said, this is so strange. Sachit and Gayatri's daughter studied in the same school as our daughter. And then I said, well, I need to find out how this happens. The first email I sent Gayatri was not encouraging. Her response was that we don't want my father-in-law to be the focus of your biting satire. So I said, no, this is not going to be, a story of any biting satire at all. It's just fascinating. The first one, maybe I should leave you time to ask questions.
Yeah. No, but I'm not just saying this because I happen to be, doing this interview, but when it's described as unputdownable, it really is unputdownable. I read it in 2 sittings. It is gripping, the stories, and how the satire, sometimes biting, sometimes not, is intertwined with commentary, social commentary, and often political. I think the bureaucrat can't stay out of the detailing of how the system works. Is fascinating, and it's informative and extremely entertaining. So let's go story by story. We'll try to give each story 12 to 13 minutes, and then we'll leave about 12 to 13 minutes for questions from the audience. So the first one is predictably Bengali family, where this young teenage boy is left adrift at sea. A lot of spoilers were given. I was pretty hell. I wouldn't have given those spoilers, but and I just think the last paragraph is just so unexpected. And it is in a sense profound. I don't know if I'm overstating it, of the mental state that he went in. So the detailing of what it's like to be on a naval carrier, I'm sure came from your brother, like you said. But the mind of Abani, like what he's thinking and what his motivation is for the unexpected act at the end. How do you get into that zone? How do you imagine that?
Well, the story is actually very simple. As I said, I was inspired by these paragraphs in my brother's short story. It's he's not a stowaway, this boy, this orphan. He just goes with his brother-in-law to a merchant navy ship in Khidirpur in Calcutta to pick up gifts, foreign gifts. And this is in the mid-70s. It's 1975, the Suez Canal is closed. And he picks up his cigarettes and his foreign soaps and his Hellman's mayonnaise, etc. And he falls asleep. So when he wakes up, the ship has set sail, he's out. The chief cook is a bit slow in, this is just to sort of tell you what's happening. The chief cook is a bit slow in telling the captain that we don't have a stowaway on board, but we do have a guy this kid who's just not meant to be here. And the captain says, giving, I think, very cogent reasons, just throw him overboard. And that's exactly what happens. So right. The kid survives, and the story needed, throughout the, I shouldn't be saying this, but throughout the story, the sea is forbidding. And at the end of it, it took care of me, he says.
Right.
He's abandoned, so and he goes back to it. So that's it. Sorry for giving the punchline away, but and it's a long story. In fact, my brother who's here, who said, I see that you want to impress your readers with the amount of research that you have done, so which is true. Yes. So I said it's true, but more than that, it's that life is something about which I, as a reader know nothing. And I said, look, if I as a reader know nothing, I'm sure the people who who are going to read this story might actually be as curious about the merchant navy life as I would be. So I just sort of packed it in with detail.
I see. And about Abani's motivations, why he would in the end do what he did without really, giving everything away. How do you get into that mind space?
I thought it was logical because he's just a helper, an unpaid helper in this shop in Howrah, and the choice is just to hang around there for the rest of his life. Bringing in the flour and taking away the sugar and so on. And the choice is that, or just joining a crew. And
in spite of his experience, that's what he chooses.
Yeah, the experience for him, his life at least, is so monotonous that for him the experience in retrospect becomes a great adventure. So,
I see. Okay. And there's one line in that story where this Bengali gentleman from Howrah is trying to communicate with a Tamil police officer in Tamil Nadu, and the line is, and then they both conversed in Hindi till it didn't sound like Hindi. And I was like, dude, what a time for that line to arrive when all the Hindi imposition debate is happening. So I guess there's certain things that just find their way in at the right time, at the right place. But the characters that you've picked in that story, whether it's the cop in Tamil Nadu, the captain. Now, the power that a captain wields in the Navy is like God. You said, he can just throw him overboard and everybody must obey. He is the god of that ship. That kind of a dynamic, I didn't see, and that's true for some other stories, there's little judgment. You just, like you said, for very cogent reasons, he said, throw him overboard. You are just observing what the situation is like. Do you actually have no judgment on these characters when you're writing them to make them seem that, look, I'm not saying whether the guy is good or bad, that's just how it is? Or do you have a point of view on how each of these guys is treated and treats others?
Well, if you're looking, the first captain who says that this kid has no business to be here, he doesn't, he's just, I'm not responsible for him, he shouldn't be here, etc., etc. And he gives, as I said, very good reasons for his being sort of taken off the ship. Now, he is, if you want to push it, he's the villain. And so I was careful that the hero, the first officer of the other ship, the ship that saves the boy, the first officer of that ship too, comes from that same part of the world, Central Europe. So just to balance that out, but that I'm not making a judgment. I think it's just that you have different kinds of people all over the world. It's his love for birds and his love for marine sort of, distances that albatrosses fly and distances that seagulls can fly. That sort of thing helps the chief officer to say that, look, I see birds there, they shouldn't be there, so can we just change course and see if there's anything there in mid-ocean that needs to be picked up. It's not a moral judgment. My first story, I think, is just my idea of an adventure story. As I said, I at least in fiction written in English by Indians, I haven't read detailed stories about the merchant navy, at least I haven't, maybe. And I thought, why not? Why not just mention this as this adventure story? How does one get, for example, if in a country with which you have no diplomatic relations at that time because of apartheid, how would you get the government of South Africa to respond to this
injustice?
Yeah, it is injustice. How do you rope in the shipping company in distant
Netherlands?
Norway.
Not Norway, right? Yeah.
Norway.
No, it was Norway. Yeah, it was at the end. Yeah.
Etc. So these were things new for me, and thanks to my brother.
Can we identify your brother, please?
Yes,
is he here?
there he is.
Thank you. The detailing was fantastic.
Well, he was not, he was pretty unkind, but, it helps. No ship can move at that speed.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yes. You can't, the ship cannot turn 45 degrees, that kind of stuff.
So you took creative liberties there.
Oh, yeah. I said, well, at one point I said this, I like the sound of a sign saying, we sail at such and such. I like the sound of Quartermaster General. So I just put that in. And he said, nonsense, what is a Quartermaster General? It has to be signed by the captain, etc. So,
So that's the first story. It's really good start to the rest. The second is Revenge of the Non-Vegetarian, which is a very unusual kind of story. This, like the first one, like you said, is your version of an adventure story, a dark adventure, but an adventure nevertheless. The second one is just so unusual in its motivations of this cook in the home of a bureaucrat who kills the whole family and is put on death row and is pretty unperturbed by that. He has no reason, he has no enthusiasm to live. There's no greed for life, but he's not depressed and wants to die either. It's just a really unusual story. The plot, the character, why, this Mr. Anup, what's the name of the gentleman who condemns him to death? And then Madhusudan Sen, yes. Where did that story come from?
It's been published before. Speaking Tiger published it as a novella. In fact, in 20, that ill person in that corner there, he and I decided, I said, should we just try and publish this as a novella? Because it's just see how it works as a kind of booklet. So it's been published before. The germ of that story is also, believe it or not, a government file, which I read about, a long time ago, 40 or 50 years ago, really not 50, 40 years ago, in Bombay. That, this guy was in death row, a fax or a letter arrives, doesn't reach him in time, and he's hanged.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, okay, is this true? Where can I find? And obviously, no details available anywhere. When I started working on it, I said, look, it can't be a sort of modern story. And I said, why, I'm sort of summarizing. Why can't this boring civil servant, this ICS officer, this was a moment of inspiration. Why can't he be Agastya Sen's father? Because Agastya Sen's father in English August is very nice and very sweet and incredibly boring. I said, no, give him a past. And then...
so this is the backstory.
It's the backstory, and you can't imagine how closely I had to reread English August to see, is there going to be a mess up here? There was one mess up, but that I've sort of cloaked, glided over. But it worked. I said, so Madhusudan Sen is Agastya Sen's father, and he later turns out to be whatever he is in English August. But he's actually someone who, because of his principles, has sent a man to death. And that suddenly I said, okay, that sounds nice. And the rest of it, the poor fellow who, the rest of it is plot.
Even that story has a lot of detailing. If any of us are ever in prison, I may be at some point soon.
Yeah, I hope it's not because of this session.
No, not
otherwise it's fine.
Accused of far worse. So the detailing of how to write mercy petitions, etc., it's so thoroughly done that I can kind of get halfway there.
All my friends are here. I'm useless at this at research. My doctor friend from Bombay is here. Lawyers, everyone's been incredibly helpful. I cannot sort of reveal to you my secrets, but what I do is, okay, this is what I want, and I want it by tomorrow.
I see. So, Just the reasonable bureaucrat emerges
Yeah,
whenever you
yeah,
write.
just, like tomorrow.
But tell me, is there ever a danger? I mean, I don't know if I should use the word danger, because your first book, and I'm assuming it was your first book, English August, unless you wrote something before that I'm not aware of, became such a successful film. Is there a tendency of writing a book, but at the back of your mind, writing a screenplay because this could be adapted and a Netflix series or something?
Not at all.
Does that happen? Because the first one is just written so bookishly that I can't imagine it being translated into cinema. The Abani story. But the last one, I found it could make a fantastic show.
Is this is this an offer?
Well, yeah, sure. We have our production team here. We got the contract signed. But no, does that ever happen to you? Is that...
No, I mean, English August was, certainly not written with a film in mind, but believe it or not, this is also a sort of good story. I was in Shastri Bhavan, and in Shastri Bhavan, if you're an undersecretary, you share rooms. I was with this sort of colleague. You share rooms, you also share a telephone. So the phone rang, and may I speak to Mr. Chatterjee, please? And he said, "Aapke liye." And then he said, "Kaun bol rahe hain?" So she said, "Shabana Azmi." It was Shabana Azmi. You see, because if you're Bombay type, if you're a Maharashtra cadre type, you meet all kinds of sort of famous people. And so he just said, "Shabana Azmi." And it was. She said, "Look, there's a friend of mine who wants to make a film out of your book." So I said, "Sure." But it took, this was 1988 or 89 or something. So it took about 6 or 7 years.
So, but that did not tempt you into writing every book, thinking, this will become
because,
a film.
that was sort of one-off. It's not, also because we wrote the screenplay together, but between the writing of the screenplay and the film, as I said, 6 long years passed.
So what is the starting point of when you write? I just want to pull back, and we'll come back to the third and fourth stories. And the fourth story is the longest and the most fascinating, although the first is my favorite. How do you approach the process of writing? Is it like this idea, then that just a misri banti hai, you put little sugar and it keeps depositing around? Or is it that, okay, now I have to write a book, I've been sitting idle too long, or maybe not. Give me a process of how does this come about?
Some of it is mystery, and the rest of it is that I sit down every day, and it's like a fix. It's like a fix. I'm sure it's like these marathon runners who run 100 kilometers a day and so on.
We have one here actually, there in the specs.
That's right. No, he doesn't. Well, no longer 100, right?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know.
No, you.
Yeah.
It's no longer 100 kilometers a day, but no, it's just it's a fix. So I just sit down, whether the 2 hours at a desk whether they are productive or not is not relevant.
That you're there.
Yeah, I just sit down. So
sometimes something emerges, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, even if it's 2 sentences, I put down something, and then you read it the next day and say, "What shit is this?" But yeah, I just need to sit down every day. So I'm always in a bad mood. My family will confirm when I can't.
Okay.
But that's I'm sure people have more sort of better ways of working, but I can't.
But commentary of the system. I mean, the story may not be about bureaucracy or about social friction, but it forms a very important backdrop for the ether in which your characters swim. You think that's just because of your experience as a bureaucrat that finds its way into every story of yours, and in a significant amount of detail? Do you realize that?
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I did my I did English August and the Memories. The Memories I thought was completely, was my attempt at a funny book. The rest of them aren't particularly anti.
No, not anti, but there is that world exists. The detailing of how the ridiculousness of the system it emerges somewhere or the other, even in the one on the Raj, or even in how the bureaucracy of jurisdiction is handled in the first one. It's always a very important part of each of your stories, at least from what I've read.
Bureaucracy is always funny, you know. And I don't think, I mean, for example, it's like Rag Darbari. You know, it's not, or the great. You can't ever mention any Russian writer without saying the great Russians. But Dostoevsky and Gogol, I mean, they do bureaucracy like no one else can, because they've really suffered it. It's very easy to sort of poke fun at it. But in the case of the first story, it's important. You can't. I mean, how does in the first story I was in two minds about should we kill that poor kid. It would have been very easy to just when the second ship reaches him, just to find a corpse.
Right.
Then I said, no, then you won't get that nice little twist at the end.
The end twist is great. But just in, the story, there's a fictitious state, Narmada Pradesh. But in all the other stories, the Patiala is real. In fact, the schools you mentioned are real. I was just curious, is that the publisher said don't mention any state because of some experience that have happened, that you're bringing our state a bad name? Why is in one story the state fictitious, but in the other stories everything is actual cities?
Poor Ravi Singh, I haven't accepted a single one of his suggestions. It's a wonder that we are still friends. But no, Narmada Pradesh, etc. is because if you're dealing with a court case that goes up to the High Court and Supreme Court, and you're giving dates. This happened at such and such date, and the government pleader said this, and the advocate said this.
Someone could get offended and say,
no, much simpler. You don't want to get the procedure wrong. You don't want to say, listen, from here it doesn't go there, it goes there. This High Court doesn't, that kind of stuff. So even when you ask your legal eagle friends, believe it or not, they get tired of your questions. Really, just can you just shut up? Can you just then just stop? In fact, they stop answering. So that's the time you say, okay, let me just quickly sort of skim over this one. And if you create a fictitious state, Narmada Pradesh, then you're free. Because if you say Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and you say, oh my God, listen, Jharkhand, when was it created? It can't be Jharkhand. Oh, it is Madhya Pradesh. Okay, now Madhya Pradesh, which district will it be? Oh my God, it can't be this. Because somebody will say, listen, this district, the headquarters is not here, the headquarters is, etc., etc. So it's just much easier. It gives you a lot of freedom to do that. Having said that, there was no other constraint in non-vegetarian, apart from the fact that I needed to keep Madhusudan Sen's character.
Right.
I needed to have it not jar with anything that English August had already
committed to.
Yeah. I had described him as. That was pretty easy to do, but still you need to cross-check all this stuff.
Right. Now the third story, which is The Scent of Red Herring, is about, based on your friend.
Sachit and Gayatri's, yeah.
Prem. Prem, a name at least for my generation made famous by Salman Khan. He's called Prem in every Suraj Barjatya film. See, I give you these pop culture things. This generation knows nothing about pop culture.
Live and learn, yeah.
So that's about a little boy who's kidnapped, and Prem cracks the case with some help, or maybe not, of Sardar with the flatulence problem, who's a cop, oversized Sikh policeman there. And that too is funny as it is sad. And I mean, it's amazing how you weave death and murder into your stories and yet retain certain humor to it. In 1961, was there a market for detectives here? I mean, of course, he was the first, but how did this person go on from there, from cracking that case? Then what?
Well, that's what initially I found so fascinating, that here is a man who's come back from the US. As the story makes clear, the family has invested in him. They've sort of spent money on his education. He, instead of continuing his studies as an engineer in Chicago, cracks cases, helps, trains himself as a detective. And then he comes back, and then all hell explodes at home. And his father particularly, who is a civil surgeon in Simla, is very, very upset. And then when I asked Sachit and Gayatri, they said, okay, we'll give you the first case and then see what you can make of it. The first case was perfect in that sense. And I said, okay, then I have freedom to use the first case as a backbone. And then, because for me, I don't know if you'll agree, for me, it's the story was fascinating apart from the sort of bare plot. The story was fascinating as a period piece. I've visited Patiala twice in my life, but just imagining small town in North India, Patiala, with a history nevertheless, 1961. Here's this very tall man who's come back with chain smoker. That's all I know. Father is a civil surgeon. Mother sends him down from Simla to Patiala. Go and stay with your uncle because, it's just too explosive at home. A kidnapping takes place. And he goes and offers his services. And the man says, are you nuts? Who the hell are you? And we'll go to the police. And he says, no, I'm a private detective. What the hell is a private detective? Etc., etc. That's how, and I said, okay, let's just see where this goes.
I don't think a Bengali could crack the Lodi scene. He did a good job.
Lodi is my, you see, because I said, okay, it's happening in January. What the hell happens Sikhs just drink themselves to death throughout the year. So what happens in Lodi?
That's so yeah. In fact, the Lodi pyre is the climax. That's where all the action unfolds. And finally, coming to the last story, the longest one.
This Bunter. We grew up reading Billy Bunter.
Who is he?
We.
No, who is he? Who is Billy Bunter?
We all grew up reading Billy Bunter, man. But I don't know. These guys don't know who Billy Bunter is. Unbelievable. Yeah. Anyway. Billy Bunter is this very fat boy.
Right.
This man, Frank Richards, used to write, apparently, 3 books a week about this school called Greyfriars. Unusual because it's full of mindless students. Even by the standard of British schools, mindless. And Billy Bunter is even more mindless than the others, except that he's enormous. Terrible plots, etc. One of them is Hari Jamset Ram Singh, mindless Indian prince. And the same plot for 30 books. Billy Bunter gets into trouble, he steals people's food and so on. Well, as I said, many of us grew up reading Billy Bunter. But this is again something that stuck with me for
But the Hari you mentioned appeared in the Billy Bunter story.
He's very much there. He's the opening bowler in one of those stories.
Oh, I see. So you've taken that and then...
Each and every aspect of the Hapless Prince is from a Billy Bunter book.
So this whole reference that I won all those matches for you...
They're all true.
Okay.
And the only one with a faint sign of intelligence in Billy Bunter is a boy called Harry Wharton, who's the sort of head of something called the Famous Five. So I said, if Harry Wharton is the sort of bright guy, then he must become an Indian civil servant and become a corrupt Indian civil servant. So that's it. And the rest of it I found in the 2 books I read. One, unfortunately, I forgot to acknowledge, the Cambridge Economic History. There's one on the Indian princes. And the other is this lovely book called The Lives of the Indian Princes by Charles Allen and Sharda Dwivedi, I think. Anyway, I could have, in fact, that story I could have gone on forever because it's fascinating. And the rest of it I just put in. I said, if you have, there were Indian princes who were actually sort of nationalistically inclined. There were. Very rare. And the rest of it, should we give this plot away?
So it's basically this king whose father is no longer alive. So I guess he is king now, although he's not a prince anymore. his Mata Rani plots for him. He is, in the beginning, I just disliked him because of my dislike for the whole royal Tam Jham and the Tamasha. Dude, get over it. But he has some revolutionary ideas. So there is some kind of arc which, what's it called in cinematic terms? What arc is it? The redemption. Redemption. See, these are all Netflix.
New, I must learn. Yeah, redemption.
So there's a redemption because he wants to do something to teach these, white oppressors a lesson. And of course, his plan goes awry because of this Billy Bunter character who eats so much. And of course, he becomes this little curiosity for the women there. But again, the detailing there of just the hierarchy of the princes and the British Raj, how they can take your salutes down from 9-gun salute to 7-gun or 11-gun to 9-gun.
No, 99. Queen Victoria got 99, I think, or the Viceroy got... No,
this Harry got 11 and then he threatened to take it down to 9.
Yeah, and since no one is going to notice this, I might as well tell you. There was only 1 year after the research I did, 1907, 1908 or 1909, when they could meet in that train, all of them.
Okay.
Including Mr. A.K. Ghosh. Because he had just been freed in the Alipur bombing case. And the British were after him. He could go up to Chandannagar, and from there he was going to go to Pondicherry. That was the one time. So I said, that's the month where Hari Jamset is going to write this letter to him, asking him to come.
And so you weaved all these events into this.
Oh,
if I was more well-read, I would have said, okay, this is that.
I'm glad you said it, because otherwise I would have said it.
But I'm not. So, okay. So please be warned that there are these historical events that are happening in that story that actually happened.
Including this Raj soldier called Frank Richards with the same name. He was in Maharashtra in Deolali. Dulali, get a Dulali, he was fell ill. And he was taking a train from there to go to God knows where. He has 2 volumes of autobiography. Old Soldiers Never Die is one, and something else. Very boring. And he's also on that train. He hates Indians and so on. So I said, okay, there he is, the ideal. Let the characters created by Frank Richards meet. It's the pure Billy Bunter plot. Meet another guy called Frank Richards and they just beat him up. Etc., etc. So anyway, I've given away the plot. But that's it. It's just shocking.
But a lot of it is not plot driven. It is just how the characters interact with each other. The detailing, I think, is fascinating in your books and in your stories. And I think the one thing that is the most difficult, because even if I've attempted writing and I have a few unfinished manuscripts lying, Ravi, I'll come to you. But ending something you started is always a challenge, because either it's a really shitty end, or it's too predictable, or it's just too neat. And I think what is wonderful about each of these 4 stories is that the end is so clever and unpredictable, not neat, but still satisfying and complete. I think that is
Why, thank you.
The magic of these stories. So we will take a few questions from the audience. We have 15 minutes. I've been told it's an hour long, so 8 we have to wind up. So Tanu there has a mic, so if you could just raise your hand and ask a question. Your brother's the first one to raise his hand with a swagger, so I would prepare myself if I were you. So please go ahead, sir. And usually whenever I'm moderating these sessions, I always say, keep your questions brief, short, and a lot of people when they come, they want to give everyone a lecture. I won't say that this time because Upamanyu can take care of himself. So you're on your own, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, very briefly. When are we going to meet Agastya Sen again?
Yeah, well, I should. He's around. He's around. Soon, I think, but not the next. It's soon. I mean.
Lekin, sir, it is right time. मैं बताऊं, revenue models are being created just for, IAS wanting exam wale. Like, newspapers are having special podcasts only because the best and most likely to pay audience is the guys taking exams. Whether it is IAS schools coming up or civil services, मैं तो IAS बोलता रहता. So if you want to revive him, best time. Just
Yeah,
say.
but the thing is, it's complicated because he's grown old. From 21 or 22. You can't again have him as a 22-year-old because then you'd have to set it in 1981.
Cross a Wolverine, Agastya. He doesn't grow old.
And the small town has changed. Right now it's all on Instagram and things. So,
But that'll be, for someone with your talents, I think that'll be fantastic. But I genuinely think right now, I'm saying this, I'm not just joking, I'm sure all of you know, the civil service bug is so big right now that this guy is going to be welcomed with open arms. You really got to revive him. I really think you should twist his arm on that one. He's your older, younger? Huh?
Elder. But Mahal is, what about Mahal?
माहौल क्या सर आपका तो बीफ खा के मर्डर कर रहा है कैरेक्टर हाँ हिंदी के बारे में लड़ रहे हैं मैं ही जाऊंगा सर आपको कुछ नहीं होगा there's one lady right at the back.
I don't care if it happens to you. I don't care. But, I'm not.
We have a question there.
This is there's only one mic. It's some kind of economy drive.
So how much of Agastya is Upamanyu Chatterjee?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I wouldn't have written it if I didn't put a lot of myself into him. That's true for almost all the characters one creates. If it's sort of some boring guy, why the hell will you waste your thought process on most of it is in the first book. The intensity is much less in the. I mean, he appears in the memories. But there, he's just, a conduit for the jokes. But I think people who write, this is a Henry James heavy quote, people who write fiction do not need to write autobiography. I think it is. You should ask Dr. Trivedi.
Do you have a favorite out of these four?
No, they're all no. Because Ravi Singh, it's all his fault. Likes the Hapless Prince the least because he's so ill-read. Because he hasn't read Bunter, so it's become my favorite. But no, all four are
okay.
Really good.
The young lady at the back there.
Yeah. So before.
Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I apologize. But because in the last story, the knaves don't ever turn their back on the king. So I learned that from the last story because 7 times you have to do this. I was just making sure I stay in that zone. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so before I go ahead with the question, I think as a added way of convincing you, if I could say, I read English August about 3 years ago, and while the mahol has changed and come down to Instagram, I think I found myself in a very similar spot to Agastya, with friends going off to the Ivy Leagues and abroad for their education while I work for a social sector grassroots job here. So I think that should be a convincing take as well for the new generation. That's one. Coming to the question, I think it's similar to what she said, but then a little bit more adding to your detail thing. If you know or remember, if you remember a particular instance which you have actually taken from your life, something funny which you put in English August, is something I'd like to.
No, on the contrary, people who were offended by the book, there were many, said, how is it possible that nothing happens to this trainee? And it's true that in some civil service lives, you could, give him a flood in chapter 1 and a famine in chapter 2, and a communal riot chapter 3. And at the end of it, he'll become Mother Teresa. You can do it. So it was important for me to suggest that nothing happens to this guy. Whereas actually, so that's faking it. I mean, in one sense. I mean, he's just not doing anything except smoking dope and sort of jerking off. So in that sense, it's not true because I have a point to make. But sure enough, there are lots of, I was learning Marathi very sort of, with a huge amount of disinterest, but lots of things. I was being trained as a BDO and so on, where you just don't want to put that in because doesn't fit into what you want to, what you want to not say, but you want to delineate. For me, English August is about the hopelessness and the sort of alienation of English in India. That's what I thought the book was about. But it doesn't work like that, because everyone who reviewed the book said, oh, it's just so funny and the bureaucracy is just so ridiculous and so on. And so you can't argue with a good critique which doesn't say what you wanted to say. You can't say, no, that's not what it's about. You said, oh, thanks, that's it. But
thank you. When you look this side, the king has your ear. The king has your ear when you turn this side.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, all right. Congratulations on an amazing and a very fast. This turnover has been really, really quick, but I confess I was aware that you've been working on novellas for a long, long time. My question, if it's a question, is not about the content inside the book, but the cover. The title of the book is amazing. It's poetic. It's like the Carpenter's song. There's a kind of hush all over the world. But the hush of the sea is an antidote, is an antithesis, because the sea is never silent. But the hush is the intent of the sea, that it's constantly creating, destroying. So that is the continuous hush. But the other thing, and at the end I'll ask you, why did you make this the title of the book? But the beauty of it is that the sea is in the first chapter, or the first story. We're still students. The other three are all land-bound. So it's perhaps the sea of humanity which is more uncaring. And it's the glaciers that are melting, the continents melting that are coming up on the predicted to inundate the land. So is that the hush that...
Did that just happen, what you just said?
no.
Witness that in real time?
No, the last paragraph of an earlier story, which was first published as Desolation Lust, but in volume 1 of these short stories is called Bombay 1984. At the end, in the last paragraph, there's something about the sea. He's on, the hero, Jamun, he's on the beach in Madras and recovering from some fever. The sea roared out its unconcern. It just stuck with me, the phrase. But here this is a kind of it's a quotation from the story itself. Fortunately, one of the few things Ravi Singh and I agreed on, that it sounded poetic enough. So we let it be as the title. The Stink of Red Herring was another possible title. But, theek hai, rehne do.
This is more romantic.
We have time for one more.
Okay, this is just an observation that I made. Maybe it's silly, but anyway, I'll ask. So you repeated, I think at least twice or thrice, that the private detective guy, he returned from the US. And English August is, of course, English August. And then there is the friend who went to US and who's never talking about it. And then in English August, there is also the letter from the girlfriend who's working in US at the moment. So I'm like, what is this thing that you got with US? Like, what is happening there? Like, because especially I'm asking this because you mentioned, that he came back from the US. So it's like something. So I don't know if you've heard of the story of the fox and the grape. It's like a children's story. I don't know if you've heard of
This
it.
generation is just not well read.
We don't read grape stories. No.
It's a children's
Only the
story.
grapes of wrath.
It's a children's story where a fox is trying to get a grape and he ends it by saying, it's too sour anyway.
Yeah. No, that's the crow.
No, well, I've read it with the fox. So is it like
Yeah.
Well, so I was wondering if it's like a fox
But
grape
the point
relation.
is, what's the obsession with
Yeah.
America? And if I might add, with
Why
Bengalis.
don't you read adult stories? What is this, yeah?
As a kid, I still remember it.
Anyway, no, this is a fact. Prem Kumar, the central figure in Red Herring, actually comes back from Chicago. It seemed completely strange to say, no, I don't want him to come back from Chicago. He must come back from, Helsinki. No. So I said, okay, Chicago is good enough. About that letter in English August, 30 years have passed. I actually received a letter from a friend of mine which was so well written. I said, let me just put this whole bloody letter into the book, and that's it. What else? The third thing was what? Why do I hate the US? I've just been there 2 or 3 times.
You just what, sorry?
I've just been there 2 or 3 times. There's nothing to hate. What the hell?
No, I don't get any hate from any of your books. There's no judgment. In fact,
No, but here is this young girl who has read some fox grape story, and that's it.
right. As a kid.
As a
That's
kid.
fine.
Thank God for
Growing
specifying.
up is boring.
For
So you need
specifying.
not. We can get one more in. We have 2 minutes. There's one at the back there.
Why there is no cover image in your book?
No photograph.
In
yeah.
cover image, in this one.
Sir,
Well, this is it's meant to be volume 2. Because volume 1 also has the same design.
but why no like photograph or illustration?
Because
or,
the two look very nice together. And
Acha, as a
companion volume. But I must say that the blue was originally greenish. This is another secret from Ravi Singh. So I said, what is this shade green that you've chosen? And he, very wounded, says, it's the color of the sea. So I said, oh. It would never have occurred to me. So now it's become this respectable blue.
But he has a last laugh because look down at the carpet, my friend.
But do we have volume 1 somewhere? Tanuji? Okay. No, because we don't want to get into all that. But anyway, if you put them all both together, they look, oh.
All right, like that. So it looks like a collector's item.
And soon volume 3 will not soon. But
The
yeah,
French and-
because, where are you?
That
You see, because, can I tell them? You see, because they came up, this is trade secrets. They came up with such bad covers. I said, what are you doing? So they said, I said, no, I sent them a Galima. Said, well, just copy this, yeah. Better colors. These are better colors.
But thank you all so much for coming. I'm guessing Mr. Chatterjee is around to sign. Oh, sorry. The book. No. I won't want to overstep, but I just want to make.
Yeah.
I'd just like to Abhinandan's thanks.
Abhimanyu. That's how she began. She said, okay, listen, have you met Abhimanyu? So I said, no, that's me. So I said, that's me and almost Abhimanyu.
I would like to thank
She said,
Upamanyu for
Upamanyu
giving
is
us
talking to
another
Abhimanyu.
taste. I'd like to thank Upamanyu for giving us another taste of his sardonic humor,
Biting satire.
biting satire. And I'd also like to thank Abhinandan for taking the time to come here and do this wonderful conversation. And all of you, of course, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.